Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Meal Support Podcast, Serving Those Who Serve. We're so happy you joined us today. And today we're doing our conversation to meet one of our panelists, Elizabeth Meyers. We're going to call her Liz since we have two Elizabeths. Maybe you guys can keep that straight, but I can't keep it straight. I call her Elizabeth because that's what I'm used to calling her. So how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. It's beautiful sunshine and that dumb hurricane's finally gone.
Yay.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening, we just got through a Cat 5 hurricane that went all the way up the East Coast, and we both live in North Carolina. So for those of you who are watching this down the road, that's what we're talking about. A Hurricane Doreen, I believe it was. So yeah, we're very glad it's gone and we didn't get a lot of damage from it.
Yes.
So let me tell you a little bit about Liz. Liz is a U.S. Air Force veteran. She is also a 20-year military spouse, the mother of 8. Her oldest son is serving in the United States Marine Corps, and she homeschools all of her children, which I did as well. So we have that in common. She's an author and a blogger and a speaker, and she helps to teach others how to overcome adversity. So we have like all of that in common.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. Besides the same name, all
And the
of that,
name.
everything.
Right.
And I don't have any children in the military. And my spouse career is 30 years, and I'm not a veteran because that wouldn't work out very well.
Yeah.
I don't have the personality to be to go through basic training and all of that. I don't think I would have made it very well.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is technically I don't either. In my first job as a lieutenant, we did some sort of personality survey, and my results came back like, you should be a social worker or a counselor. It said definitely not in the military. And so I was hiding my results. I was like ashamed, like, oh, I'm not in the right career field.
Well, I know when we did it, we did the ASFAB in high school, and it came back and said that I should be like all this mechanical stuff. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You people don't know what you're talking about. I must have just filled in dots. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I never had any plans to go in the military. So I probably was just wasting time and filling in dots because I really didn't care. But I was like, there is no way I'm mechanical. I mean, I make a good helper for my husband when he has to fix something. But now I tell him when he's like, can you come help me with this? I'm like, I had you a son so that he could do it. It's not my fault. He lives 14 hours away.
Yeah.
So that is not fair. But you've got lots of boys at your house. So
yeah, we have an even split, 4 boys and 4 girls, and then 1 daughter-in-law. So our oldest son is married.
Oh, yeah, cool.
So that's fun.
Yeah, we have 2 girls and a boy, and then one of our daughters is married and our son is married. So we have 3 girls and 3 boys. So or 3 girls and 4 girls. And see, I don't even know. I'm so tired today. I can't even count. So 3 girls and 2 boys and 2 granddaughters that we got by way of my son-in-law. So that was a lot of fun. So we got 2 grandkids at 8 and 10. So we started with them older. So I'm getting ready for some people to have some babies.
Yeah.
I want to do some rocking some babies.
Nice.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
I was also born into the military. I was born at what used to be Carswell Air Force Base. My dad was enlisted during the Vietnam era. So I have a long military history. My husband and I met at the Air Force Academy, but we actually didn't start dating until after graduation when we were both lieutenants. We got stationed in Texas together.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that is where we met and started dating and everything. And when we started out, my husband wanted to have 2 kids. I wanted to have 4. So we compromised and multiplied it. No, that's not actually what happened. It was just kind of with each child we had, our hearts changed a little, and we decided to keep growing our family. Yeah. But he only has 1 brother and I only have 1 sister. So we don't come from large families. This is all new to us. It's all new to our extended family of like, what are you doing with a family that size? But we love it. And, you know, when a bunch of kids are gone at various events, our boys do scouting, you know, so they may be camping or there maybe somebody's at a birthday party or spending the night with friends. We're like, it seems so quiet. We only have 4 kids or we only have 5 kids or whatever. So
yeah, I remember you telling me you went to the beach this summer and everybody was big enough to kind of take care of themselves and do stuff, and it was kind of strange.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, everybody carried their own things to the beach and back again, and no diapers now. Our youngest is 7. So we're out of the baby and toddler phase. It's like a whole new freedom.
Yeah, yes, it's like it changes. I know when my two girls stayed in Michigan, when we got transferred back to Louisiana, we went from 3 to 1. And I say we went from 3. I wanted 4. My husband, he wanted to start having kids like the day we got married. He wanted to get pregnant. That was his plan. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that, because my history is having a brother and a sister that are 9 and 13 years younger than me. I kind of raised them along the way. So I had kind of done a lot of the parenting things. So I kind of wanted a break. So we waited 3 years, and then we had a miscarriage, and then we had our 2 girls, and then we lost another one, and then we had our son. And I wanted more, but my husband was like, I can't do it. After our son was born and he went to neonatal, and he was in neonatal for a week, my husband was just like, I can't do it again. I can't, my heart can't do it.
Yep.
But I was disappointed. I wanted another one, and I really wanted 4. I wanted 2 girls and 2 boys, but my son's like, I'm fine with no brothers, nobody to mess up my stuff. So,
there you go. It all works out.
and his wife wants 4. So I'm hoping I'll get 4 grandbabies out of them. But I told him, after meeting her and getting to know her and seeing her with her family and everything, I told him, I'm like, you need to wait until she can stay at home. She cannot be a working mom. Because she is very much loving, adoring, likes to carry babies and rock them, and a homemaker and that kind of thing. And I was that way too when we first had ours. And so when I had to go back to work when Megan was 10 months old, it was torturous. And so I told him, I'm like, you guys don't need to have any until Michaela can stay home.
Yeah. I had my first son when I was still active duty, and that's a whole nother, dual military is difficult, but also, being a parent in the military has its own challenges too, as well.
So how far into parenting did you go before you got out of the military?
It was only about 6 months.
So
at that time, they were doing drawdown in the military and trying to decrease numbers, and they sent out a message saying, we need to get rid of some captains, and we'll waive up to a year of academy commitment, which is unheard of. Usually you have to die or commit a crime to get out of academy commitment. But I had just had my son, and I really had a hard time getting back into my work afterwards. A lot of people do go right back to work, and that's fine, and that works for them. It just did not work for me personally.
Yeah, me either.
I just really felt like anybody could do what I was doing in the Air Force, but I was the only one that could be his mom.
Yeah.
And I really grieved about having to go back to work.
I did too. I cried.
This is not a judgment of what anybody else is choosing to do. I'm just sharing my story. But so I volunteered. I said, hey, I'll accept your offer to get out. So I shaved off the last few months of my commitment so that when my husband graduated from pilot training, we were able to move together, which was a blessing, because all of our other moves had not, with both of us dual military, getting assigned together was a real challenge. We spent the first 6 months of our marriage in 2 different states. And so we joked that we were reserve married people. It was 1 weekend a month is when we saw each other.
We're active duty, military, and reserve married.
Yes, exactly.
I actually know a lot of people who would like that setup. It wouldn't work for us, but I know a lot of people it would work for.
Well for us. We were newlyweds, and we're like, I didn't have a very understanding boss who was willing to work with me. His attitude was like, why do you want to be stationed with this guy? And I'm like, well, I sort of got married to him because I wanted to live together.
Yeah, exactly.
But so eventually we were able to get an assignment together, but it took some doing.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I'm like, I married him because I kind of like him, and I like to hang around with him. He's kind of fun, to hang around. So I kind of married him because I wanted to spend time with him, not be in a different place than he is. Because a lot of people were like, why do you do all those moves? And because a lot of wives stay home, and that's fine. I wanted to just go with my husband. I'm adventurous anyway. I like to go and see and do and everything. So. So I know your book. Tell us a little bit about your book and what your book's about.
Yeah, my book's called Undefeated, From Trial to Triumph. And
is her book?
That's it. And that was really born out of the most difficult time in my life. We lost our son in the 2nd trimester of pregnancy. And I just really had a hard time overcoming that adversity. I was really not prepared to deal with it. And it really just shook me up in a lot of ways. I got stuck emotionally. I was depressed for a long time, and I didn't realize it was depressed. I didn't know what to do with that. I struggled in my faith. I struggled physically. It took a big physical toll on my body just because of everything that happened around that. I just struggled mentally with my thoughts. And so I really had a difficult time for a number of years. I really was just stuck in a place of grief and of suffering, and I couldn't get out of it. And I couldn't figure out what the root cause was. Am I tired because I'm depressed, or am I depressed because I'm exhausted all the time? Is it a physical thing? Is it emotional thing? Is my chemistry off? Is it a spiritual thing? I couldn't get to the bottom of that. And so I decided, you know what, forget it. I'm going to quit trying to figure out the root cause. I'm just going to attack all four fronts. So I started seeking help mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And coming out of that time, part of what I did was I went to counseling. And I had a lot of ups and downs, some days where I felt decent and other days where I just did not. And so one of the counselors told me, she recommended that when I was in a better place, to write a letter to my depressed self saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to, say the positive thoughts you have so that you can read them when you're in not such a good place. Which I thought was brilliant, because when I was thinking one way, I couldn't imagine thinking the other way. Depression is just like having on a dark set of glasses that just colors the way you see everything. And I could not see it otherwise. And then when that would kind of wear off and I'd come out of it and I'd take those glasses off, and I'd be like, why was I so upset? It's not that bad. So just that back and forth of kind of these two, my husband said, is kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. And when he came home from work, he could tell which person he was talking to. It was that obvious of where I was. So I started journaling and writing in the morning, and I got 3/4 of the way through my first notebook, and I'm like, I think I'm writing a book, and that was the first time I had this thought of these things that I'm working through. Maybe somebody else could be helped by this too. Right. I was in that place of, because I lived with untreated depression for 5 years, and I was like, I wish I had known this sooner. I wish somebody had told me this, or I had learned this, or I'd figured it out. And so to just be able to write that down, and now I can share with other people, hey, this is how I got unstuck from that place. And maybe you can use some of this too. Everybody's different and every story's different. Right. But that's on the cover of the book. There's a guy kind of standing up on a cliff overlooking like the dark valley that he's come from. Yes. Right there. And he's up there looking, or maybe it's a she, I don't know, it's a silhouette. But that was just kind of how I felt. I've come out of this valley, and I want to look down to other people who may be in a similar valley and say, hey, there's hope, and there's a way up, and there's a way out or through. And so that's the first book. Once I actually started writing, I realized, I have a lot more to say than I thought I did. So I had to divide it up into, it's 3 books, and that's just the first one. The second one is kind of more the meat of the message, which is what I'm working on now, of those 4 areas that I mentioned earlier. Plus I've added the 5th one is the will. Yes. So it's body, soul, and spirit, and your soul is made up mind, will, and emotions. And just the willpower to do it, the motivation. Yes. The purpose, the drive to say, my life is worth something, and self-care is part of that. If I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of my family. I can't serve other people. Because I really neglected self for a long time. It's always putting others first. It's, being a mom, volunteering at church, volunteering with spouse stuff in the Air Force. And I hadn't really devoted any time to me. So that was part of that physical part, was just learning to eat better, learning to sleep better, moving my body, getting some form of exercise, and how that, they all feed off of each other, and they all help. Learning how to think differently I don't have to be a prisoner to every thought that flies over my head. Right. I can reject some thoughts, and I can say, no, that's not true. When I'm in a dark place and I say, nobody cares about me, or God's abandoned me, or this person hates me, or whatever, to just look at it objectively and go, no, that's actually not true. I know I feel that way right now because of where I am, but that's really not true. And I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to choose to believe that people really do care about me, even if I can't perceive it right now because of these glasses I'm wearing. So
Yeah.
That's the message that I'm working on now.
That's so amazing, because like in my book, that's what I talk about, is my kids would always ask me when I would go to counseling, and I went through this a similar depression, but mine was triggered by childhood trauma, and which manifested in chronic illness, and I didn't know how to take care of myself either. I didn't have a clue.
I think most women don't.
If I had been on a crashing plane, I would have died, because I would not have put my oxygen mask on. I would have taken care of everybody, my kids, and then everyone else around me. I would have taken care of, and I wouldn't have thought about myself at all. But mine, I was like, I liken it to being a volcano. One minute I was dormant, just sitting in a room, crying, staring at the wall, rocking in a rocket chair. And the next minute I was spewing hot lava on everybody, because I was just so angry. And I had all this loss and grief and everything that had built up. And it has to have a pressure valve. Eventually, you get to the point where it's so built up, you've got to have a pressure valve, and it's got to let loose. And I went to a counselor for 7 years to walk through it. And my kids would always ask me, what is it that Miss Kathy does for you? And I'd say, she's like a new pair of glasses. When I see her, it's like putting on a new pair of glasses. I can see things differently. Because she would say things to me. I'd be like, well, they did this and this because I'm just such a bother, and I'm such a burden. And she'd say, well, what if you look at it like this? And that's what made me think, she's like a new pair of glasses. It's like being able to see things in a different way from somebody else's perspective. And then you go, oh, I never saw it that way, because I was looking at it from my experience and my emotions, and I couldn't look at it objectively. And I couldn't see that the only reason that they behaved the way they did is because they were hurting, and hurting people hurt people. So it just, it's just this cycle. And I decided the cycle stops with me. It's not going to continue. And you could see a little of it in my kids because of everything I went through. But I really think that them watching me walk through it has helped them to know, hey, it's okay if I need to go talk to somebody. It's okay if I need to have a meltdown. It's okay if I need to cry for a little while, which I didn't know, because my family just buried all their emotions, and we never talk about anything, and nobody ever acknowledges anything. Nothing ever happens. So it was really a very, very trying time, a very difficult time. And so it's just like every time we talk, we just have more and more to
yeah. I think about, with suffering, or with, things like depression or grief or these things, I kind of think about it sometimes like an infection. There's like an infected attitude or emotion or mental state within me, and I have to get that out. Like just covering it over doesn't make the infection go away. It just makes it swell and makes it hurt worse.
Yes.
But you kind of have to like lance it and get that junk out. And speaking to a counselor is one way to do that. Journaling was also a way. I also did that in addition to counseling too. But and I think that's especially hard as a military spouse. We move so frequently. It's difficult to have those close friendships where you could just do that naturally, or even if you do decide to go get counseling, to kind of pick up and move every couple of years and start your story all over again with a new counselor is difficult.
Right. I think if I had to go to counseling now, I'd just hand the counselor my book and go, here, just read this, and then we'll pick up from where this goes.
Yeah. So I think that's just the added component to that being, mil support and serving those who serve is having that continual connection is a challenge.
Yes. And I know I went through two counselors, like I took out two counselors. I had one in Michigan where I started going through all of this. And then we moved to Louisiana, and I had to find another counselor there. And I went for a while where I didn't have a counselor, and I was doing okay. And then because I'm from Louisiana, some of my family members started trying to reconnect, and I tried to make those bridges and make those connections again. And I just ended up getting hurt again and being mistreated again. And that made me feel like I need to go back into counseling, because I still have some things to work on, because I still have some anger issues, and I still have some things that I've got to get through. And that's something, as military spouses, we have to recognize, is when we need to stop and take care of ourselves, because we not only have the job of mom and wife, but a lot of times a single parent, like I know your husband's deployed right now, so you're juggling everything, with trying to, doing a business and writing a book and homeschooling the kids, and your husband's gone, and that's difficult. That's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at least it was for me. And then having to start over and make those connections again. And I know when we moved to Michigan, we very first moved there in October, and then we moved into our house November, over Thanksgiving weekend. My husband left February 1st for a 3-month deployment, and I did not know anybody. And we joked that people in Michigan just have their lights on timers. There's nobody really that lives there. Their lights just come on at night because you never see anybody, because it's so cold and damp and it's gray and cloudy, and just I was not used to that at all, being from the South. And so I didn't know a soul, and I got sick with bronchitis, and I was so sick I couldn't even climb the stairs to go to my bedroom to sleep. I slept on the couch. And I finally talked to my husband on the phone, and I'm like, what am I going to do? We're out of groceries. We're running out of groceries. I can't drive. I can't even climb the stairs. I need to go to the doctor. I had been taking my medications and everything and doing my nebulizer and all, but it just wasn't helping. And he said, well, I brought you that card for that lady that did that Mary Kay party. Do you still have that? Call her. One of the guys in my shop she's his wife, and see if she can take the girls to the grocery store or to the commissary. So I called her and asked her, and she said no, she couldn't take them to the commissary. And she goes, but I'll call Harry and see if he can come pick them up. And that's her husband. And I thought, I have like 12 and 14-year-olds, and I'm going to put him in this car with this strange man. I just couldn't, but I didn't know what else to do. I was just stuck. And so come to find out later on, she didn't drive. She had never driven.
Really?
So that's why she said she couldn't take him. I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, why don't you want to help me? I can't even move. And he called immediately. She called him. He called immediately. Do you need me to bring milk tonight? And I said, no, if you'll just get them tomorrow. Then I had to call the commissary and get an approval for them to write a check, for them to fill in a check, for me to sign the check and send with them. And, it was such a mess. But now it's hilarious looking back at it, because my kids call him Grandma Harry. And they pick at each other and aggravate each other and throw cold water bottles on each other. And he's just like a grandfather to them. But at the time when he picked them up, they were both huddled in the back seat together in the same seatbelt, just like scared to death of this strange man. And, it all comes around because he had a heart attack about a year later, and his wife didn't drive. So I was able to take him to his doctor's appointments and do all that for them. So it always... When you give, or when you let somebody give to you, you always get an opportunity to be able to pay it back. Might not be the same person, but you always need to be open to that. And as military spouses, we have to do that. We have to depend on our military family. And for me, I've depended on my military family and my church family for so long. I just don't even know what it would be like without them. It's been an adventure for sure. At least that's what the commercial says.
and at least as military spouses, we always have these great stories that are either, kind of crazy or funny. I saw like a meme recently that said, me as a new military spouse, I hope something good happens today. And then as, me now as, at least I hope that whatever happens is at least funny.
Exactly. I hope I can tell it later and it'd be a funny story.
And that distance shortens, because at first something happens and it's like, well, a year later I can laugh at it, but after 20 years of experience, I'm getting to the point where I'm getting closer and closer to being able to laugh at it in the moment.
Yes.
I'm just like, okay, this is just our crazy life and we're just going to roll with it. But.
Exactly. And that's because you become adaptable, and that's what I talk about resilience a lot when I speak. And that's what I tell people. Resilience is not really something you're born with. It's something that you acquire along the way. And the more obstacles you come up against, the more resilience you can gain, or you can sit back and say, I'm going to let this one take me out. You get to choose.
Yeah. Well, it's just like an obstacle course in military training. You know, they run you through obstacles on purpose to build that strength and confidence. And I think sometimes our life is set up that way, where there's obstacles in our path to teach us to be resilient, to teach us persistence, to teach us that we're stronger than we think we are.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't never know unless we tried to get over that obstacle. But that issue you're talking about not having people there to depend on, is exactly how I got stuck in the place I was in the first place, is because just where we were in our military time when I lost my son, we were in between friends. Like, all the people who knew that I was pregnant had just PCS. But my husband was in the November class of a year-long course. So everybody else was like graduating in May. This happened Memorial Day weekend. So they left before they knew what had happened. And then we waited a month, and then a new class came in, and none of them knew that I'd even been pregnant. And so I'm meeting new people for the first time and trying, people say, well, how many kids do you have? Common question. I never ask anyone that question anymore, because I know how painful that can be for women in certain situations, but I didn't know how to answer them. And I felt, if I just sort of ignored the fact that I had just lost a child, I felt like I was denying his existence. But if I brought it up, it got really awkward really quickly, and they just went, oh, and they would leave.
Right.
And so that whole thing of how do you make new friends when you're in the middle of a very raw grief that just happened, that I don't know how many other places besides, military life where that happens somewhat regularly.
Yes.
But that was part of, I just had no one to connect with, no one to reach out to, nobody that was there to kind of support. And that was where I had this sense of abandonment of like, God must not care, because if he did, he would have sent someone to help me out.
Right. Exactly.
But I think, had I been in a different situation, or even had I been in the middle of a military assignment, I just don't think that would have been I would have had more support. I would have had people around me. So it's just a unique challenge that we face when we're going through hard times.
That's what I say about, going through my journey, that my book is about beauty rising from brokenness. It started when my husband was deployed after 9/11, and I went home to Texas, and that's when everything blew up. And when he came back, we were in the process of moving from Massachusetts to Michigan. So I left all my dear, dear friends that I had in Massachusetts, moved to Michigan, where I didn't know anybody. We moved in the middle of winter. Well, winter was coming up, so you don't meet a lot of people up north in the winter because it's so cold and the days are so short. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt the same way. I was like, well, God, why did you abandon me in Michigan? And I hated the state for a long, long time. And my counselor finally said, I'm like, why do I feel this way about Michigan? And she said, well, none of us like the place that we dumped all our garbage. This is where you just, this is where I started going through it. Now I call it it was really my 6 years of wilderness instead of 40 like Moses and the Israelites. I went through 6 years of the wilderness. We have friends there, but we didn't really have the same connection that we've had other places. And I feel like that was kind of part of God's plan, that he needed me to kind of be isolated and not depend on other people so that I could depend on him for my healing, and that I would go to him first and not run to my friend for comfort. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was part of the grand design. I really feel like it was, mm-hmm. but I could not see it when I was in it. Yeah. And that's the thing. When you're in the midst of it, you can't see mm-hmm. what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. You can't, it's hard to tell. It's hard to differentiate what's going on around you.
Yeah. And we were in Alabama when I lost my son. And then that December, he graduated from the school we were at. We moved to Virginia. And I was thinking, by then I'll be past the due date. We'll get past what should have been his first Christmas. I'll be in a new place. Everything will be fine. But what I realized is you can't move away from problems that are inside of you. Mm-mm. I kept changing my address, moving to a new state, PCSing, it didn't fix me. And, I had looked to this of, when we move, I'll get a clean slate and I'll start over.
Yes.
And I realized I couldn't escape it because it was all in me.
Yes.
And that goes back to that point of you got to get all that junk out to get through that.
Well, and people always talk to me about how, oh, you're so funny and you make us laugh. And when I speak, I'm always making jokes and making people laugh. And that one of my running jokes used to be, we had to get 2 moving trucks because we had to have one for all of our household goods and one for all of my baggage. that I carried with me from my childhood, which I finally, after we moved from Michigan, I didn't have to take another truck.
Yeah.
I was able to just leave all that stuff in Michigan. And I don't feel that way about Michigan anymore because my daughters live there and my granddaughters. And so now it's a great place and we know great people there. But during the midst of it, you kind of associate whatever you're going on with you with your, with whatever's going on inside of you. It kind of all just becomes a blur of difficulty, And so what do you think that, how military spouses can use some of those resiliency skills and things to get them through the transitions that they're going through?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn, and I think a lot of us do, is to be willing to ask for help or to seek help or to, just kind of reach out. I think a lot of us, for me, a lot of times it just comes down to pride of, I want to do it myself. I'm also a really hardcore introvert, so talking to people in general about anything is a challenge for me sometimes, much less saying, hey, will you help me? But being military spouse, moving around so much has kind of pushed me outside that comfort zone. And now, I show up at a new place and I turn to somebody I just met 5 minutes ago and I say, will you be my child's emergency contact for XYZ? and they're like, sure, because they get it, because they have to do that too. You show up at a place and instantly they want to know, well, who are your top friends in all the world? And I'm like, I have not even unpacked my boxes yet.
Right, exactly.
I'll give you a name. So I think that's part of it, is just that willingness to be that community. There are so many amazing, helpful, wonderful, awesome people in the service and around the service. And then also there are so many resources, just official ones and unofficial ones. And there's so much out there, so many different ways to get help. And I think sometimes we don't take advantage or access what's available to us. Sometimes because we don't know, and sometimes because we're just too overwhelmed, and sometimes because we're just too prideful to ask.
And that was the big key for me, being too prideful, because I came from a very long line of stubborn, hard-headed, self-sufficient women, and we didn't ask for help. Yeah. And so that was really hard for me. That was a hard pill for me to swallow.
We're not meant to do it alone. We're not designed to. And I think to embrace that community, even like you're an extrovert, so you create a community wherever you go. I've seen you do that. But I don't, I tend to just be a loner, and I'm like, I would just be more comfortable sitting in the corner reading a book. But that's not how we're meant to thrive, especially in this kind of environment. We need each other.
Right. And whatever our strengths are, we can lend those to somebody else, and whatever somebody else's strengths are, they can lend those to us. Right. And see, I've had to learn to be by myself, which was very hard for me. I had to forcibly make myself go. When I was going through counseling, I was so dependent on always having other people and always having that community and being the life of the party and just building this all around me. And it just all comes very naturally to me. It's not even something I even think about doing. It just happens. It just is. And so I had my husband take the camper and take it to a campground like an hour and a half away from our home, and leave it and me, and take the kids and go back home and leave me there for a whole week, just by myself, with me and my books and my movies.
Okay, that sounds like paradise to me.
It was hard. Oh, it was so hard. The first couple of days was so hard for me. And I'm just looking around because it's in the middle of the week. So there aren't a lot of campers there. There aren't a lot of people there. So it's just like, what do I do with myself? And it was really hard for me, but it was something I had to teach myself to do. I had to teach myself to be okay being alone, because, and I had been left alone a lot as a child before my half sister and my half brother were born. I was left to my own devices a lot of times, which was never a good thing. Because I generally got into a lot of trouble when I was left to my own devices. I generally was trying to burn stuff up, like trying to, burn down woods and burn down the house and build a fire in the sink. And I was a really bad kid, just trying to get attention, to try to get people around me, And so I had to teach myself to do that. And I'm so glad that I did, because being empty nesters now, I'm by myself the majority of the time. Arnold's gone to work and I'm by myself. Now in 3 years when he retires, that's going to change. And after this 2 days he's been off for the hurricane this week, I'm like, you have to get a hobby and get out of my house.
You've gotten used to being alone.
I'm not just being alone, but I'm used to having my flow and doing things according to the way I'm doing them, and not having somebody come in and, well, what do you want for lunch? And do you want me to get you something for lunch, or do you want me to go get something? And I'm just like, I'm in my zone. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a learning curve, and he says he's going to get a hobby truck, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I think the plan is to get a motorhome and travel around and speak and sign books and stuff, but we'll see. Whoever knows? The best laid plans of mice and me.
So when you're a homeschool mom with a bunch of kids and you're wanting to write a book, you got to be kind of creative with how you carve out time for that. So my husband actually was very supportive, and several weekends he would take the kids camping. He would take them all in the camper, and I would stay home and I would write. And we were at a different location, but they loved to go to the fam camp on base. There was a neat pond there, and they had fishing, and they would chase frogs, and they do all this stuff. And it was just a few minutes from our house. They didn't go very far, but they'd spend the weekend out there. Well, my husband would grill these steaks and potatoes and stuff, and he'd invite me over for dinner. So I'd come out there and I'd eat dinner with them at the campsite. Then I'd go back home and I'd write more. And we did this several weekends, and that's how I was able to get my book written in the midst of everything else that's going on. But what's so funny is I knew this friend of mine who worked on base in a different place, and she said they have people who worked for them who would come months at a time, kind of TDY from a different base. And so one of the guys stayed in the fam camp. When he came, he didn't stay, in the on-base billeting. He would stay in the campground. And he's like, yeah, there's this really strange family that camps a lot. It's like this dad and a whole bunch of kids. And the mom will just show up and eat dinner and then leave. And she goes, I think I know the family you're talking about. So I got a glimpse at what we looked like to other people who didn't realize what we were doing. But when people say, how do you have time to write a book? That's the answer. I send my family away camping.
My husband goes. My husband takes the kids to camp on the fam camp.
Yeah,
just 2 miles down the road.
Exactly. So I could have a quiet house and a complete thought. I need to be able to string multiple sentences together in a row to make a book, and that's hard when there's lots of interruptions.
Yes. And that the way I got my book read was I would get up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning and write for an hour every morning while it was quiet and there was nothing else going on. And that was just God. He would wake me up, because I'm not a morning person. I mean, I might be up by 8:30, but I'm not really functional until about 10, and after I've had a cup of coffee and I've had time to move around. And part of that is my traumas and my injuries and things that I've gone through, and it just takes my body a little while to get moving. But it's it's just, you have to learn. And I am a night owl. You'll see me doing stuff at midnight, so I'm the opposite.
Yeah. Well, your body's been through a lot with the wreck and all your story. So
between all the trauma in my childhood and all of that manifesting, and then our car accident that we were in, and all the stuff that's going through, and we did just schedule my surgery, so we got that scheduled. So yay, I get to go through that again. Not looking forward to it, but it'll be all right. I'll come through that, and I'll be running. One of the gentlemen, I spoke at the American Legion last week, and one of the gentlemen told me, he goes, you're going to be bionic before you're through. I'm like, well, my kids would already tell you I have bionic ears, so because I can hear everything.
Elizabeth the cyborg.
Yes, exactly. I have an eye and an ear.
You can start writing science fiction books.
I don't even watch those movies.
Okay. Not your genre, huh?
Not my genre at all. I don't think I'd be very well at fiction. I don't have that big of an imagination. Like my kids always had great imaginations, and I was always like, okay, don't understand that, but good. I'm glad you're very creative. So, okay, well, I guess our time is just about up. I want to tell everybody, remind them again, we're talking to Liz Meyers, and her book is called Undefeated, From Trial to Triumph. That's book 1. So you want to be sure and go out and get that. And I think you had an offer for our audience today.
Yes, I have like a freebie, a printable. It's just a one-page thing of 10 keys to a winning mindset. And so it goes through kind of the highlights of each chapter in the book. There's 10 different things where you can think through those to have a winning mindset to overcome adversity in your own life, to live undefeated.
Yes, yay. So those are at her website. All of that stuff is in the show notes. So if you look at the show notes below the show, you'll have all of her contact information, her social media, her website, everything. You can look her up. And then our actual panel discussions are going to start in about 3 to 4 weeks. So stay tuned for those. And then next week, we're going to meet our next panelist. We've got 3 more panelists to meet, and then we'll be on to our panels. And that's going to be lots of fun. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
I had such a good time. And we will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, recording.
It still says it's recording.